How beautiful is this site, by the way? This is really cool. I love the look of this. It becomes like in and out of focus as you pan left and right. So beautiful. Anyway, so in this one, we're going to be talking about Zustand, or Zustand, or I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's a cool library. So I was recommended this a while ago, and I've been trying it out and playing with it, and I really actually like it. So what this is a state management library that aims to make state management much simpler compared to things like Redux and context in React. And it actually, I think, succeeds in doing so. As you can see here in this example they have on their site, you just get this Zustand library as the create function. You create your store, and then inside your components, you just use this use store hook, and then you get whatever you want from that state, and then you present it on your component. Pretty simple. So let's actually get going with an example that we can use ourselves and play with it and understand how it works. So let's head over to VS Code. And I've already created this blank React app. It's just a app created with create React app and the clean CRA template. So here we have our app.js, and we can actually start this. So in the terminal, let's say npm start. And as you can see, it's just a clean React app without anything, just hello world here. So let's create our first store with Zustand. First thing is let's actually open another terminal and install the library itself. So npm install Zustand. And hit enter, let that install. And I'm going to straight away create another file here, call it store.js, because usually you would keep your store in a different file so that you don't have a lot of code in the same app.js file. So first thing, let's import Zustand. So import from Zustand create, and here we can create our store. Let's see, we want to manage a list of people. So let's create our store here. Let's call it store or store. So const store equals create. And now we pass it the function that creates the store, which usually takes a set, which we'll see what it does in a second. And then it returns the state. Actually, so let's do parentheses and then open an object. And this will be our state. So here we want to manage people, right? I'm going to create a list of people. So here, let's say people. And this will just be an array of strings. And we'll have our usual John Doe and Jane Doe. So here, John Doe and Jane Doe. Let's also create a function that adds a person to the list once we need to do that. So here, let's create another variable inside the state, call it add person. And this will be a function that takes a person. And the way we can modify the state, we use this set function, and then this takes a callback, and a callback will take a state. And here we'll return the new state, which will be an object. And the main difference is that now, compared to things like Redux and context, we don't need to spread the state here. We can just edit what we want to edit. So here, if we say people, and then the people will now be, so we open an array and then we spread state.people, and then we do comma and we add this person that we got passed to this function. We save. As you can see, this will now edit just people and will not edit anything else in the state, which is another nice simplification that Zustand gives us. So now we need to create our use store, or actually it's already been created. Let me rename this. So let's name this use store, and let's export it. So export default use store. And now we can use it in the app.js by just importing from store use store. Now at the top of our component, we can get the list of people by saying const people equals use store, and now we pass it a selector so that we can only get the slice that we want. And this takes the state, and then in the return we say state dot people. So now we only get people. And now to show people, actually I'm going to create another component. So to show you that we can use it in nested components, because here this is the top level component. So here under hello world, I'm going to add a component, call it people. So uppercase P people. And here instead of hello world, we're just going to have a paragraph that says people. And now let's create in our source directory. Maybe put this in a components folder because that's what we usually do. So components/people.js. And here let's do RFC. This will be a regular functional component. And now let's bring that use store call, cut it and paste it here in people. And same goes for the import of the store. So paste that here. The only difference is that now we go one level back. And now here where we return our div, we can add a paragraph at the top and say we have and then maybe put the number of people. So we'll say people.length, and we'll say people in our, let's just say database, because even though it's not actually a database. And here let's show a list of people. We can do a UL. So here inside the unordered list, we're gonna loop through people. So we'll say people.map, and then for each person, we're gonna return just an li with inside of it the person itself, which will be the name of the person, because it's just a string. So now let's save everything and let's look at our app. Okay, we get people is not defined because I forgot to import it. So here in app.js, let's import from component/people, just people like that. Save, and now there we go, we get people. We have 2 people in our DB, and we get John Doe and Jane Doe. That's cool. So now we're accessing our state from inside of this nested component. And as you can see, this is different to context in the sense that we don't need to wrap our top level component with any provider or anything, because this doesn't use context in the background. It's completely independent from React. In fact, you can use it with any other library, not just with React. So let's create another component that lets us interact with our state and add more people in our list. So let's create, actually I'm going to create another component here, call it input. And this will be just an input where we can put a name and then add a person. So here inside of this div, I'm going to put an input, type text, that's fine. Let's give it a reference so that we can get the content of it when we need it. So we'll say input ref, and we're going to create this in a sec. And let's add a button here that triggers it. So this button will say add person, and it's going to have an onClick, so onClick. Let's call this add, and let's create both this reference and add. Actually, let's import from React useRef. So here, actually at the top of the component, let's create this reference. So we'll say const input ref equals useRef. And let's create this add function. So here we'll say const add equals, it's going to be a function that will call the add person function from the store. Actually, let's import that first. So here, let's import the use store from one level back store. And now we can get the add person function. So we'll say const add person equals use state, oops, actually not use state, use store, sorry. And this will take the state and then return state dot add person. So now in our add, we can simply just say add person and then add the input ref dot current dot value. Let's save and let's take a look at it. So now let's refresh. Actually, I forgot to add this. Let's add this component to our app.js. So maybe duplicate this and Control D here and say input, and put that input under people here. So input, save. And now we get our add person input. Maybe let's put it on top of it. So let's put it above people, or maybe actually between people and the list. Cool, yeah, like this. All right, let's check if this is working. So let's say I want to add myself in the list, add person. There we go. It actually adds it to the list, which is adding it to the state, and then the other component re-renders because that list has changed. Cool. One other advantage of using Zustand is that we can use some middleware that come baked into the library that allows us to have some extra functionality. One cool functionality that we can do is we can enable the Redux DevTools to work with Zustand. So let's do that. So let's go back to our store, and here we can import from Zustand /middleware, and here we can destructure something called DevTools. And to get it to work, we can simply wrap this set callback for the store with this DevTools. So we can say DevTools and then chuck that inside of it. And actually, to make this cleaner and more understandable, we can simply take this callback that creates the store and put it into a variable called store. And now we can simply pass that store to the DevTools call inside of the create call. Actually, remove this extra parentheses. There needs to be an extra pair of parentheses here. Save. And now, if we refresh our page and we open our DevTools, make sure that you have the Redux DevTools installed as a Chrome extension. Let's go here to Redux. And if we check the state, there we go. We get people. Let me zoom in a bit. And we get John Doe and Jane Doe. And if we add another person here, maybe, I don't know, Elon Musk to our list, add person, there we go. That person was added. And now we have Elon Musk and we have an action here, just like we do when we have a regular Redux store and we can play with it with the DevTools. I think this is a great advantage because when you use context, usually I don't know, maybe there's some tool that lets it plug into this, but this is just an advantage of using things like Redux. It makes it easier when you develop, but you can do this with Zustand as well. Another cool piece of middleware that comes with Zustand is something called Persist, which does exactly that. It allows us to persist our state inside of our client storage. So let's say we want to save this state. We could, actually what we could do here, we can change this to let and just reassign our store. So here we can say store equals maybe this DevTools store, and then again store equals persist, and then pass it the store. I'm just doing this so that it's more readable. So now let's pass the store to the create, and now if we go back to our app, so our list resets. Actually, let's make this erase itself once we add a person, and also maybe give this a padding so that it's easier to look at. So in our app.js, actually no, in the input, here after we add a person, we can simply just reassign this value to an empty string. And also in the index CSS, we can just give the body some padding. So maybe here padding 1 rem, save, and yeah, okay, that looks better. And now if we add a person, that should be empty. Cool, that's now empty. And now we have 3 people in the state. But if we refreshed our page, we still have 3 people in the state. Because if you go to application, actually where's application? There, application, and you go to local storage, you see that we have this state variable inside of our local storage. And we're fetching it every time our app loads, which is pretty cool. The key is called undefined, but we can actually give it a name in case we need it from a different source. So if we go to store, here with the persist call, we can give a second argument with some settings, and we can give the name config, and we can call this, let's say, usually use local storage to store some user settings. So let's call this user settings. And now if we remove this and then refresh, actually we need to add a person. Let's add Elon Musk again. Add person. There we go. We get user settings as that key. Usually you don't store actual data here. You store something like user settings, like I called it here. Actually, we could do a quick example here. So you see our app is in dark mode by default now in React, or at least in this template. So let's make the user change this setting and have it persist in our app. So we can go to the index CSS. You see the body by default has this background color dark and color white. We can make this into a class. So cut those and then here say dot dark and paste those in. So now the body has to have this class for it to be dark. So now if you look, now it's in a light theme. But if we add that class, so let's say let's go to body and here in classes, add dark, it switches now to dark theme. So now we can let the user change this in the app. So we could actually add it first to our state. So here in our state, we could add, maybe call it just dark, and then by default it's false. And also add a function that allows us to edit this. So here, because it's a boolean, we can just add a function that just toggles it on and off. So here we can call this toggle dark mode. And this will be a callback that takes nothing and then calls the set function. And this takes the state and then returns. It only edits the dark key. So we'll say here dark, and then that will equal not dark to just switch it. Actually here it should trigger not state.dark, because dark itself doesn't exist outside of the state. So now if we go to our app.js, we can import the store at the top. So let's import use store from store. And here we need the toggle dark mode function. So we'll say const toggle dark mode equals use store. And this will take the state and return state.toggle dark mode. And now we can add a button at the top. So button, and this will say toggle dark mode, and this will have an on click, which will just be the toggle dark mode function. So now if we save, we have this toggle dark mode, and actually this will toggle it, but it will not actually change the site. So let's change that. So let's use use effect here to detect it the first time. So we'll say use effect, and this will be a callback. And actually we need to get the dark key from the state. So let's duplicate this. And here, change this to dark. And by the way, you have to do this to have these specific selectors that just get a slice of state. If you do this, let's say you do this and you just destructure toggle dark mode, this will work, but this is not a good practice because now anytime anything changes in your state, this component will re-render. But by just having these specific selectors, even though it might look like longer syntax, this is better practice. This component will only re-render if one of these changes. All right, so here we check for dark. We'll say if dark, then we're gonna say let's just access it directly. We'll say document.query selector, and we'll access the body and just add this class to it. So we'll say body.classList, and we'll say .add, and we add doc. Let's copy this, and we can simply say else. Then if it doesn't exist, then let's remove it. And if it doesn't exist and we do remove, that's fine. It doesn't break or anything. And here, for the dependencies of this use effect, let's add the doc itself. So every time it changes, we change the UI and add or remove this class. So let's save. And now if we click on toggle doc mode, there we go. It's now removed that class, and now we are in light mode. And of course, if we refresh, it's still there because it's persisted in our application local storage. And by the way, now we also have the people there. And what you can do, I think you can add some settings here. You can, we have this blacklist key to the persist settings, and we can add blacklist and then just blacklist anything that we don't actually want persisted. But I don't think that's the best way of going about it. I think the best way is that things that you want to be persisted, you put them in a store. So let's actually do that. We can have multiple stores. So here, maybe this will be just for settings. So we'll call this, rename this to settings store. And maybe the people and the add person will go in a different store. So here we'll say let people store equals, and we'll take set and then actually return, so do parentheses and open curly braces and then paste those back in. And now we can say people store equals create DevTools, and we pass the people store. So we can rename this use store to use settings store and remove this export call, and here export this const and duplicate this and call this for use people store, and then pass this the people store. And now we have two stores. So let's save this, and of course let's update our imports. So here our use store should now destructure use settings store, and here this will call use settings store. And same goes for inside of the people component. So here this will destructure use settings store and then paste this here. And same goes in the input. So this will destructure use settings store and paste this here and save. And now if we refresh, I'm going to delete this from local storage. Okay, we get an error. Hooks can only be called inside of the body of the function component. Let's see. It's probably from the store. Yeah, okay, my bad. I called create here and then called create again. So this, let's remove this call and then just call it here. So save and refresh. Okay, we get length of undefined for people inside of the people component. Let's check. Oh yeah, people now are coming from the use people store. So let's say here use people store and save. And there we go. We get John Doe and Jane Doe. And now if we toggle dark mode, we get user settings with dark equals true. And if we add another person, Elon Musk, again, add person. Okay, my bad again. We get add person is not a function because that now comes from the use people store. Actually, that's inside of the people, or no, inside the input. So here, this needs to be use people store. Use people store. Did I misspell that? Oh, here it says peoples. That should be just people. All right, refresh. Okay, I'm still importing it as use people store here. Okay. And let's double check here. People store. Okay, now there shouldn't be any errors. Cool, we're in dark mode. But if we add a person here, they will be added to the state. But if we refresh, they're not persisted. Only the actual settings, which in this case just dark mode, is stored in the actual local storage. And if we go to DevTool, to the Redux DevTools, we can still see that we have our two stores here. So we can say, I'll add myself, Ahmed, add person. We can see that there is the original store, which in this case is not showing the state because it's pulling it from the local storage. But if we toggle it back and forth, we see that the state is showing here. And if we go to the second instance, it will be the people store. But now it's showing only the difference, so you have to click state, so it shows the full state. So we can see both stores here, which is pretty cool. So as you can see, Zustand already gives us a couple of advantages in it being simple. So if you're like new to state management, starting with something like this instead of like context or Redux will be much better as a learning curve, as you don't have to implement things like reduces and having to manage multiple action types, and it reduces like the boilerplate needed to have state management in React. But a caveat is I haven't played with it too much, so I'm not sure in terms of how it performs when you have like such a large app with a large state and and data coming in and out. I don't know how it performs there. I'm not sure yet, but so far I really like it. I'm gonna keep using it for my side projects. I actually really like it. What about you guys? Do you actually like Zustand? Let me know in the comments if you actually like this library and you're gonna use it, or it's just like something that you use just for fun in side projects. As per usual, the code that I wrote here will be available on GitHub in the code description, or not the code description, the video description. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.